The night my father walked into my Chicago restaurant after 9 years of silence and said I owed my sister half of everything, I realized some families only remember you when they think you've built something they can take. The contract hit my hostess stand at 7:43 p.m. on a Friday. Not slid, not placed, slammed. The specific violence of a man who has rehearsed the gesture and believes it will work. My father's finger followed, pointed directly at my face the way it had been pointed at me since I was old enough to disappoint him. Sign this, he said. 50% of this business goes to your sister, or I call your landlord tonight and you're evicted by morning. Behind him stood my mother, Susan, in the pearl earrings she wore whenever she needed to feel like the reasonable one. My sister, Olivia, in a silk dress she absolutely could not afford. And Olivia's husband, Jamal, in a velvet jacket and a watch that cost more than my first commercial refrigerator. Olivia looked around the dining room the way you look at a hotel room when you're deciding whether to complain. Her eyes moved over the pressed linen tablecloths, the custom light fixtures, the hand-lettered menu boards, and the Friday night service in full swing, every table full, 4 deep at the bar, my jazz trio playing something warm and unhurried in the corner. The lighting is harsh, she said. Honestly, I expected better. Jamal smoothed his lapel. You don't understand how to scale a business, Claire. Let the real entrepreneurs handle it. I looked at his cuffs, frayed at the left wrist under the watch. The specific fraying of something expensive maintained past its lifespan. I had learned to read those details in the years since I'd had nothing. The way people in financial freefall maintain the surface as long as possible, right up until they can't. I had checked on Jamal's startup 8 days ago. Chapter 11. Filed quietly on a Tuesday. The way financial failures always happen. Not with a crash, but with paperwork. Filed in a courthouse nobody visits. Documented in a database most people don't know to search. He didn't know I knew. None of them knew what I knew. I looked at my father. At the tie he'd loosened exactly one button, the practiced authority of his posture, the absolute certainty in his expression that this was going to go the way he'd decided it would go. And I felt something I had not expected to feel. Calm, complete, settled, almost comfortable calm. Follow me to the VIP room, I said. Let's talk. I smiled, turned on my heel, and led my family to their table. 9 years is a long time. Long enough for snow to feel like a different climate, for a city to feel like a different country, for a person to become someone entirely unrecognizable to the people who named her. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters for this story the way foundations matter for buildings. My name is Claire Ashworth. I grew up in Winnetka, Illinois, in a house with 4 bedrooms and a 3-car garage and parents who loved hierarchy more than they loved their children, which is a specific and common tragedy that looks fine from the street. My father, Richard Ashworth, was a real estate attorney with a reputation in the North Shore suburbs and an understanding of leverage that he applied without distinction to business deals and family relationships alike. My sister Olivia was 3 years younger and everything I wasn't. Easy-tempered, decorative, the kind of daughter who photographed well and never asked uncomfortable questions and accepted the world as it was arranged for her without pushing back. My parents adored her in the uncomplicated way that parents adore children, who don't require them to be better people. I pushed back, from the beginning and about everything. The restaurant had been my idea since I was 14, since the first time I worked a summer job at a small Italian place in Evanston and felt the particular satisfaction of a dining room running well, of a table that arrived hostile from the wait and left 2 hours later having forgotten to be. There was a craft to it, a precision. I loved it the way some people love medicine or architecture, as a system that, correctly run, produced something real and repeatable. My parents had other ideas. My father wanted me in law, not because he believed I would love it, but because it was the right credential for his social context, the kind of thing he could mention at the Sunday golf round without having to explain. When I told him at 17 that I wanted culinary school and then eventually my own place, he sat across the kitchen table from me and delivered a speech I still remember in full, about practicality and disappointment, and women who chased impractical dreams, and ended up dependent on men who didn't respect them. I told him I intended to be nobody's dependent. He didn't like that answer. The years between 17 and 22 were a managed ceasefire. I went to Northwestern for finance because it was the compromise that bought peace, and I learned things there that turned out to be more useful than my father intended. But I also enrolled in every culinary elective available, worked kitchen jobs on weekends, staged at 3 different restaurants the summer after junior year, and spent my senior thesis studying the unit economics of independent restaurant ownership. I built my case quietly. That had always been my instinct. Don't argue the plan before you can prove the plan. Arguing with Richard Ashworth without evidence was like showing up to court without documents. He would simply define the reality he wanted and install it. The eviction happened the December of my 22nd year. I had just accepted a position at a culinary program in Chicago. Not a cooking program, a 2-year intensive at a professional school that fed directly into restaurant management and ownership tracks, the kind of credential that opened doors in the Chicago hospitality industry. I had a merit scholarship. I had saved $11,000 over 4 summers. I had a plan. My father called it an embarrassment. That argument is blurred now. The specific words don't matter as much as the end of it, which was my father, red-faced and efficient, carrying 2 trash bags of my belongings to the front porch of the Winnetka house on a night when the temperature was 12 degrees and snow was falling sideways off Lake Michigan. My mother watched from the doorway. Olivia was upstairs. I know because I could see her bedroom light on, and I know she heard everything because the house wasn't large enough for anyone to miss it, and she didn't come down. I stood on the porch with 2 trash bags and no coat. I had left it on the hook by the back door, and my father had not let me retrieve it, and I looked at the closed front door for approximately 30 seconds. Then I picked up the bags, walked 3 blocks to a gas station, called my college roommate from a payphone, and never looked back. Not metaphorically, literally. I did not look back at the house. That was 9 years ago. The culinary program took 2 years. The scholarship covered tuition. I lived in a studio apartment in Pilsen that was 800 square feet and had a radiator that worked 2/3 of the time, and I was happy there in the specific and uncomplicated way of someone who has recently been shown what they don't need. After graduation, I worked my way up through 3 Chicago kitchens over 5 years, which is the unsexy truth about restaurant ownership that nobody talks about. You don't skip the line, you work it. I was a line cook, then a sous chef, then a kitchen manager, then a general manager, collecting skills and contacts, and slowly, savings. I incorporated my first entity, Ashworth Culinary LLC, at 26. I opened the Meridian, my restaurant on West Randolph 3 years later, 40 seats, a focused menu that changed seasonally, a wine program built around accessible bottles and 1 exceptional cellar, the kind of room where the experience was the point, not the Instagram post, which was a deliberate choice and turned out to be the correct one. We were in the Tribune at 8 months, Chicago Magazine at 14, a Michelin Bib Gourmand at 2 years, which is the kind of recognition that changes the phone calls you receive. By year 4, the Meridian had a 6-week reservation wait on Friday and Saturday evenings and operated at margins that would have made my finance professors nod, with the tight approval of people who respect precision. My father knew none of this. I had no contact with my family after that December night. No calls, no emails. Holiday cards that arrived the first 2 years were unopened and returned. I had made a clean exit because clean exits are the only ones that hold. The messy ones give people handholds to climb back in, but I knew about them. That was different. I had kept a quiet, professional awareness of their situation the way a good risk manager keeps a file on known threats. Not because I expected anything, but because information is armor, and I had learned that lesson at 22 standing in the snow. My father's real estate practice had contracted, not collapsed, contracted quietly over several years, the way practices do when a man's network ages and he doesn't build a new one. His golf round still ran on the same North Shore circuits, but the deals coming from that circuit were smaller than they'd been. Olivia had married Jamal Okonkwo 3 years ago. Jamal's startup was a fintech platform with a beautiful pitch deck, an evaluation built on projection rather than revenue, the kind of company that raises several rounds on optimism and then hits the air pocket between promise and performance. I had tracked the SEC filings out of habit. When the Chapter 11 came, I was not surprised. What I hadn't anticipated was that the desperation would land on my hostess stand. The VIP room at the Meridian seats 12. I use it for private dining events, investor dinners, the occasional celebration that needs its own space and a closed door. It has better acoustics than the main dining room, quieter, more contained, and a private bar service line that runs through a separate POS system. This was a deliberate choice tonight. I had not put them at a table in the main dining room where my Friday guests were having their evenings because what was about to happen did not belong in that room. It belonged somewhere with walls. They settled in like they owned the place because that's what they had come to do. My father ordered the Chateau Margaux, $540, the second most expensive bottle on the reserve list, without asking the price, without asking me, without acknowledging that he was in my house drinking my wine 9 years after the last time I'd seen him. He settled back in his chair and pulled out his phone with the practiced ease of a man who has never once doubted his own authority. Olivia told my floor manager Marcus, 7 years in fine dining, unflappable, currently watching this scene with the controlled expression of a man adding to a file he intends to discuss later, that she wanted sea bass and white truffle oil with hand-peeled asparagus, off menu. Put it on the house tab, she said, waving at him the way she would wave at a housekeeper. Jamal snapped his fingers, literally snapped his fingers at my sommelier, Diana Reyes, who has a master's level certification from the Court of Master Sommeliers and has been with the Meridian for 3 years. Seafood tower, lobster mac, and bring something sparkling that isn't cheap. Diana looked at me once. I gave her the smallest nod. I wrote everything down myself. Every item, every request, every modification. My handwriting in my order book, time-stamped, itemized. The bill building line by line while my father set his phone on the table in front of him like a weapon he was happy to display. I play golf with William Harrison every Sunday, he said. He owns this building. One call and you're out on the street by morning, just like 9 years ago. He smiled at me with the particular satisfaction of a man holding what he believes is the last card. Sign the agreement, give your sister her 50%, and nobody has to find out what a difficult person you can be. My mother reached across the table. We just want to be a family again, Claire. 9 years of silence, and now they wanted family. The timing was exquisite. I looked at my father. Call him, I said softly. Put him on speaker. He thought I was bluffing. I could see it in the half-second delay before his smile widened, the specific smile of someone who has just been offered the outcome they wanted. He dialed William Harrison's private number with the performance of a man who has done this before, who has wielded other people's access to money and property as a social currency his whole life. Harrison picked up on the third ring, already annoyed. My father's voice lifted to the register he used in depositions. Controlled, jovial, projecting ease. He explained the situation with the breezy confidence of someone asking for a small favor from a close ally. Terminate the lease at the Meridian tonight, as a favor between friends. The room went quiet. My mother folded her hands. Olivia examined her nails. Jamal leaned forward slightly with the expression of a man watching a bet payout. Then Harrison spoke. Richard, I don't own that building anymore. I sold it 3 months ago. A pause. The particular pause of a man recalculating a relationship. Don't call my private line for this kind of thing. The call ended. The silence in the room was a different quality than the silence before it. My father set his phone down. His face had gone pale in the specific way of someone who has just publicly exposed the outer edge of his influence and found it shorter than he thought. Jamal recovered fastest. The trained flexibility of a serial pitchman. Who bought it? Give us the name. We approached them directly. Make a better offer. I reached into my apron, pulled out the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with the seal of the Illinois Secretary of State's office. I set it on the table directly on top of the contract they had brought, right on top of it, covering the signature line entirely. Read the name of the managing member, I said. My father's hands were not steady when he opened it. His mouth moved. Apex Holdings, LLC. Sole managing member, Claire M. Ashworth. I bought the building 3 months ago, I said. I own the property, the parking lot, the courtyard, the concrete under the table you're currently sitting at. Olivia made a sound I'd never heard from her before. High, disbelieving, almost admiring in its register if it hadn't been so furious. That's impossible. You threatened to have me evict myself, I said, from my own building, using a friend who no longer had the authority you assumed he had, with a contract that required my signature to have any legal standing. I looked at my father. I want to understand which part you thought would work. He said nothing. The pale had moved from his face down into his posture, the slight collapse of a man whose architecture has just been shown to him from the outside. Jamal was back on his feet. I had to admire the reflexes, even now. The smile reformed on his face with the speed of a screen reloading. Claire, listen, forget Richard. This is between you and me now. You've got the building, I've got the platform. We're the smart ones at this table. $200,000, short-term loan, 20% equity. I'll have the contract drawn up by Monday morning. Your platform filed Chapter 11 8 days ago, I said. Case number 23-14892, Northern District of Illinois. The petition lists 7 creditors and approximately $4.2 million in unsecured debt. Jamal's smile stopped. Olivia turned to him. The specific silence of a woman reassessing. Chapter 11, she said. Not a question. A blade. The investors. There are no investors, I said. The last funding round closed without a lead. The Series B announcement was a press release, not a closing. I know because I read the cap table. You told me they were wiring this week. Olivia's voice was rising with the specific velocity of someone who has been maintaining a performance for a long time and just felt the ground leave. You told me the house was fine. You told me the house is in foreclosure. Jamal's voice cracked at the top like a split board. Your credit cards are maxed. The car is 3 payments back. You knew. You've seen the statements. I am pregnant, she screamed. You told me everything was under control. The seafood tower went over. I don't know exactly who moved. It was one of those moments where the physics of a room under pressure finds its exit point. Crystal broke. Oysters spread across my floor in a pattern that my cleaning crew would later estimate cost 40 minutes of work. Lobster claws, ice, a pool of the second most expensive champagne on my list, which had been on the table exactly 12 minutes. My father was on his feet, straightening his tie. My security team, Marcus, who had been monitoring the feed from the main room, and Torres, who covers the private entrance on Friday nights, came through the door in under 10 seconds. 2 years together. They know what a room that's about to become a police matter feels like, and they had been feeling it since the first snap of Jamal's fingers. I had already dialed. The patrol officers arrived in 4 minutes. Officer Davis and Officer Kim, responding to a disturbance call at a licensed establishment on West Randolph. Kim was young, still processing. Davis was about 15 years into this specific kind of scene and had the practiced calm of someone who has watched wealthy people discover consequences in real time many times, and found it neither surprising nor satisfying, just procedurally necessary. My father turned to them with the smile he used in courtrooms. Officers, this is a family misunderstanding. My daughter is being emotional. You can leave. He said you can leave the way he said everything, like the authority to define the situation belonged to him, had always belonged to him, would continue to belong to him, regardless of what had just occurred in this room. Officer Davis looked at him, then at me. I handed him the itemized bill, $4,520. I handed him the documentation of 5 declined payment cards. I had run all 5 personally, while Jamal was doing his pitch, using the portable POS device I carry on Friday service. I handed him the LLC documents, showing my ownership of the building. I handed him the original contract my father had brought, which contained, in its 3rd paragraph, language that 2 attorneys would later describe as constituting an attempt at coerced business transfer. These individuals consumed services totaling $4,500 without authorization, I said. 5 payment methods declined. They destroyed property, the seafood tower, 2 crystal wine glasses, and approximately half a bottle of Blanc de Blancs. I'm pressing charges for the non-payment and the property destruction. Davis read the itemized bill, read the LLC documents, looked at my father. Sir, he said, I'm going to need you to come with me. My father's face went through its stages faster than I expected. unexpected. Surprise first, then calculation, then the specific fury of a man who has realized that the person in front of him does not care who he knows or what he thinks his reputation means. She is my daughter. She's also the property owner and the business owner, Davis said, in the tone of someone for whom this distinction is purely procedural. And she's pressing charges. The handcuffs were the quiet kind, not a performance, not a punishment, just the practical machinery of a situation that had exceeded the available alternatives. My father twisted toward me as they turned him, his face burning with the specific color of a man who has never once been genuinely stopped. You are dead to me, Claire. The dining room was completely still. My jazz trio had stopped. Every table was turned toward the entrance of the VIP hallway, watching. I looked at my father, at the tie he'd loosened one button, at the handcuffs, at the face of a man who threw his daughter into a blizzard 9 years ago and arrived tonight expecting to collect the building she'd built herself out of it. You died 9 years ago, Richard, I said. You're just screaming at your landlord. Officer Davis walked him through the dining room. The jazz trio did not play, not a sound. My mother followed, crying quietly, the pearl earrings swinging. Olivia came after, one hand on her stomach, face pale, her silk dress completely wrong for what the night had become. Jamal walked behind all of them with the deflated posture of a man in a velvet jacket that had been expensive once and was now just a jacket. The front doors of the Meridian closed behind them. I stood in the center of my dining room, every one of my Friday guests looking at me. I straightened my apron, turned toward my kitchen. Marcus caught up with me at the swinging door. You okay, chef? The word chef in his voice was the same as it always was. Specific, professional, the form of address I had asked my staff to use on the floor because I believed in the clarity of roles. It was the same word as every other Friday. The room behind us was already reorganizing, guests returning to their meals, the low murmur of conversation rebuilding itself, the jazz trio finding their way back to the melody. I'm fine, I said, and I was. Not the brittle, performed fine of someone who is not fine. The actual thing. Get someone on the VIP room cleanup. Comp table 14's dessert. They've had an interesting night. Already done, he said. I pushed through the swinging door. My kitchen was in full Friday service. The controlled noise of it, the heat, the specific organized chaos of a line that knows what it's doing. Diego at the pass, calling tickets. The prep station clean and moving. The smell of butter and thyme, and the particular warmth of a kitchen that has been working well for hours. I took my station, picked up my tasting spoon. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I almost ignored it. Friday service, full house, a dining room that had just been through something and needed to feel normal again. The phone could wait, but the buzz came again, and again, 3 times in quick succession, which is not how my contacts text me. I pulled it out. Unknown number. Chicago area code. Ms. Ashworth, I apologize for the hour. My name is Patricia Nolan, estate attorney, 14 years probate practice. I represent the estate of James Whitfield Ashworth. I've been trying to reach you for several months through channels that appear to have been, let's say, intercepted. We need to discuss a trust instrument established in 1987. Your grandfather named you sole beneficiary of a secondary trust that your father has been administering. Some discrepancies have come to our attention. If you're available tomorrow, I'd like to show you the full documentation. The figure involved is not small. I read it twice. My grandfather, James Ashworth, had died 4 years ago. I had not been notified. I had found out through an obituary a college friend had forwarded 6 weeks after the funeral. At the time, I had filed it in the category of things my family had done that I chose not to spend energy on. I stood in my kitchen with the pass calling tickets behind me and my line moving in their Friday rhythm, and I thought about a trust established in 1987 and a father who had thrown his daughter into a blizzard and 9 years later arrived at her restaurant with a contract, a man who handled his own family's estate, a man who had spent 9 years assuming I was gone. I put the phone back in my apron. Heard on the 3 top, I said, let's go. The kitchen moved. Tomorrow was for Patricia Nolan and whatever my father had thought was safely buried. Tonight was for the dining room, for the 40 guests who had come to the Meridian for a Friday evening and deserved the one I had built for them. I had waited 9 years. I could wait until morning. The charges didn't disappear. My father spent 4 hours at the 12th District Station on South Blue Island before his attorney, David Greenwald, 22 years criminal defense, the kind of lawyer who billed $400 an hour and had my father's number memorized, arrived and began the process of making the non-payment a civil rather than criminal matter. Greenwald was good. The property destruction charges would likely reduce. The coercion language in the original contract was a separate matter that Patricia Nolan flagged in our first meeting as potentially relevant to a broader pattern. The trust meeting happened Saturday morning at Nolan's office on LaSalle Street. Patricia Nolan was 50, precise and thoroughly unamused. She had sandy hair and reading glasses and the specific expression of an attorney who has discovered fraud in a client's estate and is experiencing the professional satisfaction of finally being able to do something about it. She had a stack of documents on her desk that she walked me through with the systematic clarity of someone who had prepared for this conversation. My grandfather James had established 2 trusts in 1987, a primary trust that flowed to my father and had been distributed on schedule, and a secondary trust intended for his granddaughter specifically by name, Claire Marie Ashworth, that was to become accessible when she reached 30 years of age or demonstrated financial independence, whichever came first. I was 31. The trust contained, at current valuation, approximately $2.3 million. My father had been the administering trustee. He had, according to the documentation Nolan laid in front of me, made attempts over a 3-year period to have the trust reclassified on grounds that the named beneficiary had abandoned contact with the family and could not be located, language that Nolan's predecessor had flagged but not acted on before his retirement. Nolan had found the file when she took over the practice. She had been trying to reach me for 4 months through my parents' address, which is to say, through the people who had the strongest interest in not delivering the message. I sat across from Patricia Nolan in her LaSalle Street office and looked at the trust documents with the steady, detached attention I used for financial review. The number was real. The documents were real. The pattern was real, and it was not complicated once you saw it. A man who had thrown his daughter out into the cold had been sitting on money that belonged to her, in the hope that she would stay cold. What are my options? I said. Nolan tapped the stack. The trust instrument is unambiguous. The misclassification attempts were unsuccessful. The trust is intact. You have full claim. The question is whether you pursue the administration irregularities as a separate matter, which, she said, in the tone of someone who has already done this math, given the documentation we have and what apparently occurred in your restaurant last night, I would recommend. I thought about a Friday night in December, 9 years ago. 2 trash bags, 12 degrees, the front door closing. I thought about a man in handcuffs walking through my dining room while my jazz trio stopped playing. I thought about a trust established by a grandfather who had apparently understood his son better than I had given him credit for, and had tried from 1987 to make sure at least one thing belonged to me regardless. Let's proceed, I said. 6 months later, the Meridian expanded. I took the second-floor space above the restaurant. It had been storage since I bought the building, and converted it into a private event space that I called the Ashworth Room, not after my father, after my grandfather, whose name I had taken back. The trust funds sit in a separate account. I have not touched them yet. I have been deciding what they mean, which is taking longer than the legal part did. My father's attorney negotiated the coercion matter into a civil settlement. He paid a fine and signed a document acknowledging the LLC's ownership position. The estate irregularities are in ongoing review. Patricia Nolan is thorough, and there is no statute of limitations on what she found. Olivia had her baby in March, a girl. I know this because Patricia Nolan mentioned it in passing during our 4th meeting. She handles several Ashworth family matters and is careful about what she shares, but she is also a woman who knows when information is kind rather than intrusive. I have not called Olivia. I think about it sometimes, not often. The anger has cooled into something else, something closer to the tiredness of a person who understands, finally and completely, that you cannot rebuild a foundation that was never laid. What my parents had with me was utility dressed as love, and you can forgive that without pretending it was something else. I forgave it. I just stopped letting it into my building. The Meridian is booked 8 weeks out on weekends now. We added 3 staff. Diego was promoted to executive sous chef, which he had earned twice over. Marcus is floor manager officially, which he had been performing unofficially for 2 years. Diana Reyes got a raise that she also had coming. On the last Friday of every month, I close the restaurant to regular service and open it for a community dinner. No reservations, fixed menu, whatever the season is giving us. Full house, full service, no charge. My staff works it voluntarily, which says something about the people I hired. My grandfather never ate at the Meridian. He died before it opened. But sometimes, during service on a Friday night when the room is full and the jazz trio is playing and the kitchen is moving the way a kitchen moves when everyone knows their work, I think about a man who established a trust in 1987 for a granddaughter not yet born and named her specifically by name, just in case, just in case. I think you would have liked the lighting.